Good morning, everyone. Today's topic of discussion is the occlusal aspect of permanent maxillary molars. As we all know that the maxillary molars are very important teeth with respect to the dentition, plus as well as it comes as a 10 marker or a main question in your university exams as well. Sometimes the occlusal aspect of maxillary molars is being asked in 5 marks question as a 5 marks question. So let's start with the occlusal aspect. When we are talking about the occlusal aspect, we will be mainly talking about the general form, how the shape of the crown looks like when we see it from the top or from the occlusal aspect. Then the mesial, distal, buccal and the lingual outlines. So first let's talk about the general form. As we can see that the tooth is rhomboidal in shape where the mesiobuccal and distolingual line angles they are more acute, whereas the distobuccal and mesiolingual line angles are more obtuse in nature. The outline is wider buccolingually, as we can see, than the mesiodistal dimension, and these dimensions are more nearly equal than if any of the other maxillary posterior teeth. Now the mesial and distal outline they are basically divided by grooves into halves. So as we can see, these grooves are dividing the mesial and distal portion into two halves. Similarly, the buccal margin is also divided into two halves by the buccal groove, and the lingual outline is also divided into two different different proportions of parts because of this oblique groove which is there. Now coming to the components of the occlusal aspect, the boundaries which contains the occlusal table that is bounded by mesially and distally by the marginal ridges, and on the buccal and lingual side by the mesial and distal cusp ridges of the four major cusps. So we can see that there are four major cusps plus one cusp of Carabelli which does not play any major role in the occlusion. Now when we talk about the cusps, the different outlines which are buccal marginal ridge, the mesial marginal ridge, the distal marginal ridge and a lingual marginal ridge. So such ridges you will see in all the important cusps. So again mesiobuccal will have all the four, as I told you, the buccal, lingual, mesial and distal marginal ridges, plus there will be uh, yeah, okay, then the distobuccal cusp, that is this one, the distobuccal cusp. It is the sharpest and third largest of the four major cusps, and their inclined planes are named similar to those of the mesiobuccal cusp, and only the two lingual inclined planes are functional. Its lingual cusp ridge or triangular ridge forms the buccal portion of the oblique ridge of the tooth. Now what is oblique ridge? Oblique ridge is something which is an elevation which is seen on the surface or occlusal surface of the maxillary first molars particularly, where the extension of the mesiolingual cusp and the triangular ridge of the distobuccal cusps they look as if they are in unanimous, and it looks as if it is a single ridge, and this ridge is, since it is obliquely placed, and hence it is known as oblique ridge, which is a very distinct phenomena seen in only first maxillary molars, permanent ones. Again you have a mesiolingual cusp which is the largest cusp, and tip is rounded because it plays a major role that it is a functional cusp in occlusion. A distolingual cusp, which is the shortest of all four major cusps. The four cusp ridges and four functional inclined planes are similar to those of other posterior teeth, although the buccal cusp ridges extend mesiobuccally and the distal cusp ridge extends distobuccally, as we can see in the picture. Excuse me. Cusp of Caraveli, as we have already told, that it is a non-functional small cusp which is present over the mesiolingual, which is present near the mesiolingual cusp, mostly over the lingual side. Now, the size, length, breadth of this cusp varies depending on different individuals. Now, coming to the depressions which are seen over the occlusal surface, the first one is fossa. Fossa, there are four kind of fossas which are named as central fossa, distal fossa, mesial triangular fossa, and distal triangular fossa. So, as we can see in the picture here, that the central fossa is this portion which is shaded, having the widest area. The central fossa is roughly triangular in shape, as you can see, and located mesial to the oblique ridge. So this is oblique ridge and it is present mesial to the oblique ridge. It is bounded by the mesial cusp ridge of the distobuccal cusp, the distal cusp ridge of the mesiobuccal cusp, and the oblique ridge and the transverse ridge. The central fossa is the largest and deepest of the four fossa. So this is the central fossa, and the deepest portion of this fossa is known as the central pit, and since it is present at the center of the tooth, it will be named as a central pit. Similarly, we have a distal fossa which is seen somewhere over here over the distal area. The distal fossa is more or less linear in shape and located directly distal and parallel to the oblique ridge. So it is present distal and parallel to the oblique ridge. Now we are talking about the mesial triangular fossa. So it is a triangular shaped fossa which is near to the which is present distal to the mesial marginal ridge. And the deepest portion of this mesial triangular fossa will form the mesial pit. Similarly, the distobuccal fossa or the distal triangular fossa which is present mesial to the distal marginal ridge, and it is triangular in shape, and the deepest portion of this fossa also have a distal pit. Now, as we have already seen that pits and grooves, the pits are the areas which lie over the fossas, and they are the deepest portion of the fossa. And from the pits originate the grooves. So central pit will give rise to the buccal groove, which will go from the center towards the buccal area. Then central groove, which will go mesiodistally throughout the teeth, and the mesial pit. So this mesial pit will give rise to a central groove, a buccal groove, and a lingual groove. And since it is present in the mesial side, so mesiobuccal groove and distobuccal groove. Similarly, distal pit will give rise to the distobuccal groove. So there will be central groove which is coming over here, then there will be distolingual groove, distobuccal groove, and distolingual triangular groove, and distal marginal groove. So this picture depicts all the three different areas which we have seen. It shows the oblique ridge, it also shows the different fossas. So fossas are usually present just next to the elevations. So oblique ridge is an elevation where mesial to the oblique ridge is your central fossa, which is the largest fossa. Distal to the oblique ridge will be the distal fossa, the deepest portion of which contains the distal pit. Similarly, over these areas you can see the location of the different fossas. Again, we can see that the shape of the tooth is rhomboidal, where the mesiobuccal and distolingual are acute, and the distobuccal and mesiolingual line angles are obtuse. This is again a pictorial representation of whatever things we have read till now. So these shaded areas, they depict the fossas, the lines depicts the grooves, the shaded area depicts the marginal ridges, and the marginalization reveals that there are four different major cusps. So the mesolingual of which is the largest, and the distolingual of which is the smallest. If we also consider the non-functional cusp, then we can say that the cusp of Carabelli is the most inconspicuous cusp of the first maxillary molar. So this finishes our topic of occlusal aspect or discussion over the occlusal aspect of the permanent maxillary molars. In the next session, we will talk about the second maxillary molars and the third maxillary molars. Thank you.